Good afternoon, everyone. How you doing today? We're gonna spend a few minutes here talking about one of the upcoming wrinkles to the 2022 offseason. Not that this is new to this particular offseason. This mechanic has been in place for as long as I can remember and is an important part of the NFL offseason. I am talking about the franchise tag. So, for those of you who are maybe unfamiliar with the franchise tag, it basically works like this. A franchise tag is something that each team can use once per offseason to basically force one of their outgoing free agents into a 1 year fully guaranteed contract, the value of which is equal to the average of the top five players at his position. The player cannot refuse the tag. He cannot become a free agent if he's tagged. He can sit out, he can hold out, he can demand a long term deal, he can demand the tag to be taken off of him. But it's basically a way for a team to keep a player that they really want to make sure they preserve on their roster, but cannot come to an agreement with at that moment. I think the franchise tag window opens up late February and closes a little before free agency starts, the open free agency period in March. So that's basically all there is to franchise tagging. You will typically see a handful of franchise tags handed out every offseason, and often a franchise tag will be taken off when the team and the player come to a long term agreement. Now, the question is, are the Seahawks going to potentially use their franchise tag this offseason? And we haven't used the franchise tag. It's been a while since we've really used the franchise tag, hasn't it? Not exactly been one of our best practices. We used to give it all the time to Walter Jones. I think we gave it to Sean Alexander once. We tried to give it to Steve Hutchinson, but there was a paperwork mix match and we blew that. Like, don't even get me started on that. But are there any players that the Seahawks should consider giving the tag to? Now, the answer to that question would be yes. But should we give the franchise tag to any of these players? Absolutely not. And I'll explain why, but first we have to understand what players do we have outgoing who might be eligible for the franchise tag, because obviously you're not going to give it to a guy like an Alex Collins. It's going to be guys who are good that you really want to make sure you don't lose for at least 1 year. Okay, so just looking at some of the guys who you could even entertain for a minute being franchise tagged, you've got Dwayne Brown. The offensive lineman franchise tag is about 16.5 million, which is a lot more than he got last year. So no, if you want to bring back Dwayne Brown, he will take a 1 year deal at his age for a lot less than 16.5 million. Quandary Digs. This is probably the guy that most people would say needs to be tagged, if anybody, on the Seahawks. Quandary Diggs is a safety. The franchise tag value for a safety this year is 13 million. If Quandary Diggs signs an extension with the Seahawks, even coming off the broken leg, he's probably looking at getting about 10 to 11 million per year. So you could say, instead of doing a long-term 10 million or 11 million a year deal, we just do the 1 year 13 million. This is maybe the only place on this team where it makes a little bit of sense. But here's the thing, and this is why the Seahawks really need to avoid this, and why teams in general don't really like to use the franchise tag, because the players don't like it. The players don't like the franchise tag, but teams don't really like it either. They like using it, but they don't like having it take effect in the season. And the reason why would be something that I spoke about, I think it was last week, backloading contracts. When you sign a player, like let's say we re-sign Quandary Diggs, let's say he gets 3 years, 33 million. You can make it so the cap hit in that first year for Quandary Diggs is not 11 million, but 6 million, 4 million. You can make it 3 million. And you can shove a lot of that money into the second and third year. You could shove it into a void year, the invisible fourth year. So, yes, you're giving Diggs 11 million a year, but that first year is super cheap, and you can cram more contracts in under the cap. But there is no contract cramming with the franchise tag, and this is the main reason why I say the Seahawks need to avoid the franchise tag like the plague this offseason. If you do it, you run out of you do not have the ability to cram a lot of contracts in because you can't move that cap hit to another year. So, in previous years, the Seahawks have generally favored short-term deals so they don't marry themselves to things long-term. But this is the offseason where that needs to change. The reality is, it's actually easier for a team, at least in the short term, to manage long-term contracts than short-term ones because you can backload more money into later years. So that needs to be the key here. Yes, giving Quandary Digs the franchise tag might be appealing because he's coming off a major injury now, and we need to see if he can get back to top form before we give him long-term money. But with the way this offseason needs to go for the Seahawks, I'm not seeing it that way. I think that you are much better off giving Quandary Digs, if you choose to bring him back, a long-term deal that shoves a lot of that money into the later years and maybe even a void year. Of course, I'm not a big fan of bringing back Quandary, period, but if you do, that's how you do it. And after that, you've got Gerald Everett, but in what universe is Gerald Everett worth $11 million? He had a good season. He didn't have a great season. Rashad Penny, no, just no. God, who else? The only other guy really would be DJ Reed, and DJ Reed, he's definitely going to get tendered as a corner, if anything. $17.5 million for 1 year. You can do a lot better than that. You might be able to get him at $17.5 million for 2 years. I don't know what his market is going to be. It'll probably be a little more than that, but the point is, there's nobody on this team that makes any sense for a franchise tag except for Quandary Digs. But as I just said, this offseason needs to be long-term contracts that allow you to cram extra deals in, especially if you want to keep DJ Reed and Quandary Digs and those guys. And that's why I say you don't want to bring back Dwayne Brown, because he's probably going to need a 1-year deal because of his age, and a 1-year deal just takes away your flexibility. So that's just a quick rundown of the Seahawks' current relation with the franchise tag. I'm not seeing a use for it this offseason. And honestly, that's a good thing because, like I said, players don't like the franchise tag. But honestly, I don't think teams do either, because it sucks having basically a massive 1-year deal that you cannot backload at all. And I don't think void years are something you can do with a franchise tag. So you're just taking on that whole cap hit at once. Like, imagine if this offseason we had to franchise tag DK Metcalf. Now, we don't because he has 1 more year on his deal. But imagine if more than half of our current cap space went to just DK Metcalf. It's a lot better to give him a 4-year, $90 million deal and only have like a $7 or $8 million cap hit that first year. Make sense? So yeah, that's about it for franchise tagging. I don't plan on discussing the franchise tag much this offseason because it just makes no sense. There are unique circumstances where it does. This is not one of them. And that's all I got. So let me know what you guys think down below. Peace out. Go Hawks. And see you guys later tonight.